Hello everyone, my name is Sandy. I am a front-end developer based out of Toronto in Canada. In this screencast, I will show you how to take your CSS to the next level and how to speed up your web development process using less. You will learn how to define variables, how to declare reusable mixins to keep your code clean and organized. We're going to talk also about nesting and how to do mathematical calculation with the operators. For this training, you will need a code editor, so I'll be using Sublime Text. You will also need a precompiler in order to convert the less syntax into standard CSS, so we're going to be using a third-party application, Simpless, which is very easy to use. I would recommend that you use a modern browser like Chrome or Firefox. For a better learning experience, a working knowledge of HTML and CSS is required. And finally, working files are included and downloadable in order for you to follow along with me. So we can now get started with how to speed up your web development process with less. Thank you for joining and enjoy the training. So we are on the website where you can download Simpless. So this is both available for PC and Mac users. So once you have downloaded this one, we can get started. And I have opened the file index.html in the code editor. So I am using Sublime Text. And we have also the stylesheet documents where we have the variables and the mixins. You also need to open the same file index.html in the browser. So right now you can see that this is pretty bare bone. We're going to take care of styling this one with less. So now you're going to open the two documents in the code editor. And if you're using Sublime Text, you have the options to split the view in two by going to View, Layout, and select two columns. So you can have the less documents on one side and the HTML documents on the other side. And we're going to start with the variables. To define a variable with less, you're going to use the @ symbol, followed by the name of the variable. Then to this variable, you're going to assign a value. So in this example, that's going to be in hex code color. Then you must finish with a semicolon. And you can have different types of variables. So you can have named colored value, also the hex code. You can also assign a string to a variable. You can assign a numeric value, like the @font size. And you also have the options to assign a list of multiple value, multi-value, like the example of the border that takes 3 different values, and the @padding, which is also a numeric value. So we're going to start with the h1, we're going to style this one, and we're going to write h1 for the selector and the property color. And for the value, that's going to be the variable @color2. So we're going to save the document. Then we're going to check out the result in the browser. And after refreshing the page, there is not much happening, and that's because the browser can only read CSS, so that's why we need a precompiler. So the Simpless application has a nice drag and drop interface. So from wherever you have saved the course materials, you're going to find the file style.less, and once you have found this one, you can then drag and drop it on the Simpless application. Now we see that we have added a new file. And there is this icon right next to the name that you can click, and you can then read on the right that the compilation was successful. So that was quite simple. And back in the code editor, you're going to notice that a style.css document was automatically generated, and we can read on the style.css file that the color variable was replaced with the next code. So I'm going to add this file in the head section in order to make reference to it in our document. And finally, you can see that the change has been reflected in the browser. We're going to continue with the demonstration of the variables, and this time we're going to target the header. And what we want is to apply a border that takes normally 3 different values. And for that, we already have the variable @border, to which we have assigned a list of 3 different values. So we're going to apply this one. And I also want to add a text align center. Then you can save. This is going to be automatically compiled into standard CSS. And here we go. And we want to apply the exact same styling for the footer. And here it is, so I have just copied the exact same CSS properties for the footer. And when you check the style.css document, you can see that this has been translated into standard CSS that can be read by the browser. And let's see in the browser. Here we go. So now you have a border and a text align center applied to the footer as well. Now we're going to see how to define mixins, and we have this example, radius, to which we have assigned CSS border radius properties. So the radius is a property that came with CSS3 in order to add rounded corners to an element. and in order to guarantee the cross-browser compatibility, we need to use the CSS vendor prefixes, like in the first line, WebKit for Chrome and Moz for Mozilla Firefox. And this can be a very tedious process if you need to write multiple lines of code every time you want to apply rounded corners to an element. That's why with less you can define one time a mixin in which you're going to store a set of CSS rules, then you can reuse it multiple times in your document. When you declare a mixin, in brackets you're going to pass a variable as an argument. The same variable will be used as a value for each of the CSS property. So we're going to start a demonstration with the header. So we're going to apply rounded corners to the header by using the mixin radius, and we're going to pass a value as an argument to replace the variable at radius. And when we check the output in CSS, we can see that the header selector inherited from the CSS properties that were defined in the mixin radius. Now let's see how this looks in the browser, and here it is. So now we have the header section with rounded corners. We're going to do the same for the footer. Because the mixin is a reusable object, I'm going to simply copy from the header, and you're going to see in the output in CSS that this time also the footer inherited from the same CSS border radius properties. So you see that by writing just one line of code, so this is all these multiple lines of code that have been generated by the precompiler. And you can also notice that this is starting to be kind of redundant because we have the exact same CSS properties both for the header and also the footer, which is kind of against the last principle, which is to cut down on code and save you time. So what we're going to do, we're going to write a custom mixin. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut this from the header. Then I'm going to store it as a set of rules inside common rules, which is now an object that I can use multiple times in my document. So I'm going to do that first for the header and also for the footer. So with the feature mixin, so less allows you to keep your code dry and clean. Now we're going to go see how this looks in the browser. We're going to see that now we have also rounded corners for the footer, and this was achieved by using a few lines of code only compared to the output in CSS. Another great feature with less is nesting. So just like the example of the HTML structure where you can nest HTML elements within each other, with less you can also nest CSS selectors which are part of the same group. For example, we're going to do that for the h1, which is part of the header. So we're going to nest the h1 selector inside the header selector. And we're going to nest another selector because this one, what we want is to actually add some content after writing CSS. So we're going to use this variable to which we have assigned a string. And we're going to use the pseudo-class after to append some content after the h1. So we're going to use the ampersand, meaning that we're going to target the parent element, which is the h1. Then we're going to use the CSS property content. Then for the value, that's going to be at string var. And for the output expected, the string with less will be appended to the h1. So we're going to see how this looks now in the browser. And here we can read writing CSS with less. We're going to continue with nesting, and this time we're going to target the container, to which we're going to apply some padding. Then inside the container we have a paragraph, to which we're going to apply a bigger font size. So we're going to use the property font size, and there is a variable at font size to which we have assigned the value 24 pixels. So we're going to use this one and simply use this one as a value for this property. Then we're going to see that we have a much bigger font size for the paragraph and also some padding applied to the container. To complete this training, let's talk about the operators that allows you to do mathematical calculations directly in your less syntax. And there is one example that I'd like to use, like the container, to which we have applied some padding. But let's say that we'd like to use more padding left and right. And for that, we'd use the shortcut for the padding property. So the first value for top and bottom, and the second value for left and right. Then we're going to increase the value of the variable at padding, so whichever value was assigned to this variable, this will be increased by 20. So you can see that this has been automatically calculated and translated into a numeric value, 35 pixels, for left and right. And let's use another example. So this time we're going to target the header. So we're going to use the same variable and the same property, font size, and I'm going to make this font size bigger. For the H1, I'm going to use 10, and then we're going to see that the output in CSS will be 34 pixels for the H1. And we'll see that now we have an H1 which is much bigger. So we have done some math calculation, we have defined variables, mixin, and we have also used some nesting. So the less features allows you to extend on the CSS syntax, it helps you save time, write a better and more maintainable CSS, and also speed up the web development process. Thank you for watching. This is now the end of this training. I like getting to know others on Learnable, so do not hesitate to get in touch with me on Twitter with the handle @san10ludowski and come say hi.